become a part of a religious organization that Mr. Nally alleges suggested to his son that if you kill yourself, you go to heaven. He will also tell you that his son was emotionally distraught on the occasion of losing a girlfriend. And what male among us doesn't know that feeling? For his son, it was quite obviously overwhelming. What is important about Mr. Nally in this circumstance is the case that he brought against the clergyman or the organization?
Both.
Both.
Yes.
And you lost that case, Mr. Nally, before the Supreme Court of California.
Yes.
All right, we should choose a lawyer to explain this, but essentially, as I understand this decision, sir, this court said that since this was not a licensed person, you cannot hold that person responsible for any...
That was part of the decision, yes.
Yeah. Is it your intention to take this to the Supreme Court?
Yes.
Establish for us briefly, what is it? What is your grievance, sir? What is it you're asking this court to consider?
When my son died in 1979, the counselors or clergymen not only knew that he was going to commit suicide, at least one of them knew how. They knew that together with another girl, a girlfriend of his, a member of the church, he told him that he told her that he was going to commit suicide, told her that he was going to do it by shotgun shells, or a shotgun. They got into the car, they went down to Glendale Galleria, went up to J.C. Penney's where he bought the shotgun shells. And he brought them back, and he left our house on Saturday, and the body was found on Monday with his head blown off.
And you are the grieving father who not only mourns the loss of your son, would it be fair to say that you have a rage against this church for failing to be alerted by what you consider to be overwhelming evidence that this was going to happen?
That's correct. The rage has a way of dying, and determination has a way of gathering. And not the sorrow. The sorrow lives with you probably till the day you die, huh?
Yeah.
But determination to see this through. I've been with it for 10 years, and if it takes another 10, so be it.
Let us understand the consequences of this lawsuit. Can you go to your minister? You're emotionally upset. Your husband just left you. You've got these kids. We have over 300,000 such people. Should they be responsible if you hurt yourself later? And is there a difference between your clergyman and a psychiatrist or a licensed psychotherapist? At the moment, the law says there is. We should say that the church against which you brought this suit is the Grace Community Church of the Valley in California. Is this fundamentalist?
Yes.
How was your son raised?
He was raised a Roman Catholic.
So sometime during adolescence he switched, is that it?
No, I acted as a father as how my father brought me up. Generally, that's a very good start, right? And brought him up through Catholic school, grammar school, high school, private Catholic high school, and then he went to UCLA. And that's where, as I would view it, he fell a victim.
Yeah, you're not holding UCLA responsible.
Certainly not.
Fell victim. You mean became acquainted with recruiters or people?
Yes, they actively recruited him.
Was it a tenet of this faith that suicide is not a sin and that you go to heaven if you commit it?
Yes, that is their teaching, which is on tape, and the quote, paraphrasing it, but I think quite accurately, if you can't cope with your sins, suicide is God's way of calling you home. If you are a believer, you will get your reward. If you are an unbeliever, you will suffer God's judgment.
Dr. Robert Maddox, Doctor of Sacred Theology. You're Executive Director of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. You're a Southern Baptist minister, and you feel the Nally decision was correct, and you're chomping at the bridle.
I feel that the decision was fair on the basis of religious freedom. It was fair on the basis of the facts of the case. Mr. Nally, from what I have read of the case, and I've spent a good bit of time with the case, has a bit of selective memory here. What he's not telling you is that he was advised, according to the court record now,
Yeah.
he and his wife both were advised many weeks, if not months before the young man's death, that the boy was in trouble. Both clergy at the church and doctors with whom they were consulting recommended that he be institutionalized, that he have psychiatric care. And the court record says because they were embarrassed with their friends and so forth, they chose not to have the young man committed to an institution.
May I say that is gross error.
All right.
That is the court record.
untrue.
That
All
is
right.
the sworn court record.
It'd be difficult to retry this case. Let us understand what's in it. Why should we care about this, other than to join in the sorrow that Mr. Nally feels,
Phil, if I
to
may.
offer you our condolences, and there's not a parent out there that doesn't feel for what you're about here. But let's understand this. Can a preacher sexually abuse under a counseling situation?
No.
Are they protected from?
No,
They're not.
not
They
at all.
still can be sued.
Oh, surely.
Well, but
there's a
doesn't this-
law that talks about outrageous conduct that anybody comes under.
Well, Mr. Nally would say that
But the courts have suggested, the courts have found that the ministers did not engage in outrageous conduct.
Dr.
That they were being ministers. They were trying to deal with the young man.
And
in a
once again, if I
constructive kind of
may
way.
say, that is a gross error. That is an untrue statement.
Let's let Dr. What did you want to say?
Would you say that sexual abuse by a counselor is a matter of gross?
This is Annie Shelley. You sued your clergyman for sexual misconduct.
I sued my clergyman for malpractice. He wasn't my clergyman. He was a counselor. I didn't know he
Well,
was
you're
a
an adult when
pastoral
this
counselor.
occurred.
Yes, I was.
Well, see, that puts it in a different frame
Oh,
of
so it's
reference
okay
in the-
to sexually abuse an adult, but not a child.
It's
Only
a different
children you will
category.
protect.
It is a different category. Surely. It is a different category.
So because I was, over 21, it was okay that he
Miss Shelley,
Did he rape you? Did he throw you down on the floor and tie you up or something like that?
what's troubling you? Shirley Siegel. Why don't you make the point?
So only rape is not...
One of the things you're
I'd
dealing
like
with.
to speak to this for just a moment. I'm the founder and coordinator of a group called Stop Abuse by Counselors. It is never okay for any therapist, clergyman or other, to sexually victimize a client.
Did not say that at all.
Well, just
category.
hold your shirt
Sure,
just
it's
a
just
minute.
a different category.
This is an imbalanced relationship. The client is vulnerable. It is the therapist, not the client.
What happened to you, Miss
Duty.
Shelley?
I went to see a counselor because my father was dying. I was not dealing with it well, and I was very depressed. For about the first year, he helped me. He helped me get over my relationship with my dad, deal with it, get my feelings under control, and feeling all right. And then when I suggested that it was time for me to start tapering out of the therapy, he started telling me that I really wasn't capable of that. I was really messed up, and that if I left, I'd become more messed up.
You had a thing about men.
Well, I had, in the time...
Wasn't that
because
his
of the relationship,
suggestion?
Yes. In the time, I hadn't been seeing many men, and it's because he kept telling me that I was uncomfortable with men. I started believing him. I mean, you have to understand, I went there feeling really vulnerable and depressed, and I went because I needed help. I wasn't dealing well on my own.
Yeah.
And I went, and for the first year, yes, he did help me. He gained my trust. He gained all my trust. And so I believed what he told me. Obviously, he knew better than I did because he was, the man in the position of the,
I understand.
the authority. Well,
Nobody does. Everybody
I found out
understands.
that that's not true.
Well, tell us, you don't have to give us all the details, but what essentially was the grievance? What happened?
The fact that he was telling me that I was more messed up than I really was, keeping power over me, basically
Was
taking
there
my personal
sexual
power.
abuse of you?
There
Well,
was...
Isn't that critical, or am I pulling teeth here?
No, it is critical, but it's not the only part of it.
No, but if you don't
It's the
share
part
that with
that
this
people
audience,
see.
we won't have the whole story.
Right, it's the part that people will notice.
Would you rather I not discuss this?
No, it's just that he convinced me that I was sexually incompetent, basically, and that he could show me how to become competent once more.
Phil, I
Well,
think
I'd
what's
like to-
important to realize is that this is going on all over the country.
You're Rick Ross. You're an intervention coordinator. Are you the guy that goes and grabs the kid out of the car and deprograms them?
No, I'm not involved in involuntary, any kind of
But
involuntary
you do
activity.
deprogram individuals who become involved with something their parents are upset about.
Families call me in regards to an individual in their family who's involved in a destructive group because
Okay.
they're concerned about what's going on.
With an audience that wants to ask a lot of questions of this very enthusiastic panel, Briefly tell us what concerns you. You feel there's a whole bunch of these folks out there.
It's happening all over the country.
What is happening?
What's happening are there have been many suicide attempts in many different extreme churches that I've been called about. For example, in the Seattle area, a mother called me about her daughter who had, for the second time, tried to kill herself. And there was just something going on inside of that church that created a climate of fear, of deep anxiety, and there were 3 other suicide attempts and 1 other death in the same church. And likewise, there are cases of sexual abuse, child abuse, hemorrhaging all over the country involving many different churches.
Dr. Sills, you are president of the Coalition for Religious Freedom, and you are likewise a Baptist minister. What do you think?
First of all, we're dealing with a situation where we've got over 387,000 churches across America, 500,000 ministers, 250 million people, 160 million that claim to have religious connections of some kind, and you deal with 1 or 2 or 3 or a dozen isolated cases.
Is that all it is?
What we don't need is government intervention in a situation that establishes the reality that Big Brother has the right to control, the right to choose or not to choose our religious beliefs. That's the bottom line of our position.
All right, I have a question for you. You said before that you didn't think that since you were older, you said that it was okay to do adults but not children. Well, what I was saying is that I think that you should be in control of your own actions after you reach the point of 18. And why did you see this guy if he wasn't, like, legal? Why didn't he have why would you go see him?
It isn't that he isn't legal.
Recommended to me.
This man was the president of the Northwest Pastoral Counselors Association. The American Association of Pastoral Counselors claims to be the top counseling group in the nation of clergymen.
Right.
High standards, etc.
No. It's unfortunate that you have to explain why you allowed this to happen. We are very
close. I allowed it to happen. It's that it was done to me. I understand that as an adult I have certain responsibilities, but you also have to understand that I went because I needed help. I was obviously not in full...
And
most of us are who go to psychotherapists. Most
need
of
help.
us.
They go because they need help.
Over here, please.
So I need to know, do these 2 gentlemen think that her counselor is not held accountable for his actions?
Not in the least bit. He's absolutely accountable for his actions. And in this kind of a situation, we've got criminal laws, and we need to utilize
what's wrong with the lawsuit? Why do you support the Nally decision? The Nally decision disallows Mr. Nally from any kind of judgment against the people whom he thinks are responsible for his son's death.
There's an awful lot that's involved in this case that has not come out as far as your program is concerned, and you'll find that out as we go along. I don't know how much time you've had a chance to deal with it.
Yeah.
If you're going back to the situation, as far as Ken Nally was concerned, and I'm a parent, I've got 3 kids, and God knows I could never understand or experience what this man has gone through. What I do know is that we don't...
criminal laws do not deal with sexual victimization in a counseling relationship. The ethical code of every major therapy group in the nation bars this kind of activity, holds the therapist solely responsible, but it's not a criminal. You can't pursue it under criminal law.
Are you there, caller?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
Okay, this recently happened to one of my friends. She was 15 years old, and she went to her one of her local churches, and she wanted to talk with the clergyman, and he told her, he got this into her head that if she sacrificed herself and she killed herself, that she would live for eternity in heaven. And this just happened about a month ago, and her parents haven't taken any legal action, but the whole school is trying to deal with this problem.
Yes, is it your understanding that the counselor actually suggested to her that suicide might not be a bad thing?
She had told a few of our friends about this. Not me personally. I was one of her not as close friends, but she told her closer friends this, and it was disgusting. And we tried that, and we told her everything. We told her parents. Her parents talked with her, and she just believed him.
Hang on a minute.
First of all, I want to say this is 1988, and the word clergyman is outdated. I also happen to be a member of the clergy, and I'm not a plant.
Very good point.
I'm not included in the word clergyman. What I'd like to say is if a person hangs out a shingle and says, I'm an attorney, and doesn't have the education or the background to support that, he can be indicted on fraud.
True.
If a person hangs out a shingle and says, I'm a doctor, and doesn't have the education or the medical school, he also is practicing under fraudulent action. However, anybody in this country can suddenly, magically, incantationally call themselves a pastor. I get things in the mail all the time about the benefits of tax breaks by just calling yourself a pastor. I think all of us have an accountability to make sure that our clergy people, our pastoral counselors are well-trained, seminary trained.
Mr. Nally is just one person among many stepping forward to say, I'll bet you more of us go to our pastor for so-called counseling than would be true of a licensed psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. Okay, so we've got a whole, over 300,000 people out there. You show up, you get out the Kleenex, you cry your eyes out. Who is that person? And how smart is that person? And what has been that person's...
And you have to know when to refer on.
Yes.
You have to know your own limitations.
Now, as a clergy person,
yes,
how am I doing? All right, I don't want you mad at me. We're too early in the show. I assume you counsel.
I do.
I assume you also respect and feel rather... it's almost a sacred liaison you have here with us.
Oh, absolutely.
Should you be held liable for... I know it's complicated.
I now have to hold malpractice insurance. I hold malpractice insurance.
Does that upset you?
In a way it does. Yeah. And it upsets me not so much that there are people who have been lacking accountability and lacking training and education, but that they have a charisma and people flock to them.
Right. But here's two testimonies now about suicide and the fact that there are apparently people out there teaching you that maybe it's God calling you home. Doesn't that terrify you?
No,
absolutely it does.
The theology of this particular church, and really I think the theology of much of Protestantism, would not condemn a person to hell who does commit suicide. I do not know anybody that thinks that encourages suicide. Nobody is that is out walking around
We've
got a really basic religious freedom issue.
In the what?
In the fundamentalist church I spoke of, let's talk about creating an environment that may be conducive to suicide. The 15-year-old girl who was in a psychiatric hospital with her wrist bandaged and her mother frantic was in a church where they created an environment, an extreme kind of an environment where people felt that suicide was the option, the way to get out of this horrible, intense, disliked world.
We've also seen it happen. Jim Jones certainly presided over. Now, I don't want to suggest that means everybody's responsible, but isn't it at the very least a very distracting example of what apparently we're able to do to some people?
Religion is a powerful force, good and evil.
Please let me get this caller. I'll give you that opportunity. Are you there, caller? Hi.
Yes, I am here, Phil. I would just like to say that I think religion in this country is getting a little out of hand with all these cults and preachers on TV selling themselves.
Yeah.
And
so what do you want to do? Do you want to decide who gets on TV and who doesn't?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Well, I just...
You know, they said Jesus was getting out of hand, too.
Oh, absolutely, Phil, but...
So who decides who's not out of hand?
See, that's the problem.
I tell you what, I'm going to be the head of the religion department. I'll decide who gets to have a church. You don't mean that. You don't mean that. You want some guy behind closed doors decide who can be?
No.
I interrupted you, caller. You wanted to say.
Pardon?
You wanted to say what? What's your point?
I just feel that you just mentioned Jim Jones and mass suicide and this gentleman here who saves people. It's all getting out of control, and if people don't just realize religion is something that's within themselves, they don't necessarily have to go see their clergymen to solve their problems. They don't necessarily have to go spill their guts. That's when they're most gullible. They're most vulnerable at those points.
All right, I'll tell them you said that.
Can I talk about the accountability issue for a minute? Okay, briefly. No matter what the abuse is, our experience, and we hear from people all over the country, when they try to resolve it through a church or a denomination, there's forgiveness and redemption for the minister and not one whole hell of a lot for the victim.
You really feel that way?
That's the way it is.
You think most of all the pastor-faithful relationship is one that benefits the pastor and not the faithful?
Well, I'm not sure I would say that. I'm just saying that there is no way to effectively redress grievances
against a religious figure.
Member of the counseling clergy or a minister, and until and unless members of the counseling clergy are brought under state regulation, there will not be, and we recommend highly that nobody see anybody who is not licensed.
You want the Holy Father, Monsignor, Right Reverend, to be a state guy who passes a board?
But there's got to be something.
Wait, that's not what I'm saying.
We got to send Father Flanagan to City Hall to get a piece of paper. What is it? You want to do this?
Yes.
Huh? And the rabbi, too. He's got to go down to City Hall and pass a test. Oh, how much kind of a bureaucracy is this going to be?
That all sounds...
What? Hang on. Who does?
Auto mechanics.
You know, it's true. You do it. Barbers. The people who cut my hair have to have a license. If I bring my soul to these people, they better have a license, too. Well, all right, I'm setting up opposite City Hall, and I'll decide who gets a license.
See, the problem with
This is not funny when you consider the pain that Mr. Nally has gone through, and when you consider the number of people who go to the pastor first before they think. A lot of people...
It's also because of a lot of the most unscrupulous people will hide behind a church.
The separation of church
It's bad
and
news
state
for the church, but it's also the fact that these unscrupulous people hide behind them because they know the separation is there.
Well, this all sounds very good, but the thing is, our Constitution says we have to have separation of church and state.
Right.
So how can we do that?
I tell you, if there was no problem, we wouldn't be doing this program.
Well, I'm not saying that there is a way to do that.
You don't think it's a violation of the separation?
What we're asking is not for they complete requisite training, but that they refrain from a list of prohibited acts, such as the law we have in Washington. We tried for 2 years to get counseling clergy under that.
Yeah. What's one of the things?
One of the, is you don't have sex with clients.
But don't we know that?
A lot of the
still
clergy,
do it.
You're going to tell us that all licensed psychiatrists and professionals don't do that?
No, but you have a
some kind of middle ground.
Professional organization.
We
got top 16 professional organizations. The field of psychiatry has the highest suicide rate of all.
Yes, I know that. We always say that.
Don't try to regulate one.
I know. Yes. And, you know, among talk show hosts, boy, we got our problems, too. I can't wait to see what the computer says about us. It is a fact that there are more suicides among the psychiatric community, but therefore what follows? What's the point? That therefore we shouldn't trust them?
No, not any more so than you wouldn't trust your clergy.
That they're human, too. That they're human, too.
If you go to your clergy, first of all, a lot of people go to the clergy for counseling because they're not going to get charged $50 an hour. That's one point. Secondly, they don't go to the psychiatrist because there's just a lack of credibility in so many arenas in that area. So it is a problem. And then to bring it under the licensing of the federal government dictates who, what, and what is not acceptable religious practice.
The community of clergy is breathing a sigh of relief because of the Nally decision by the Supreme Court.
Got a great deal of pain.
What does the psychiatric community feel about this decision?
Well, Mr. Nally may try them next, you know. We don't know whether he'll get in.
Let me give you all a chance. This audience wants in and the phones are jammed. Who is responsible in a clergy-client relationship when you're talking about emotions? We've already made the point several times on other programs here that this is a vulnerable place for a human being to be. And who's watching who, and who's vulnerable, and who can you sue? Is there a difference between having a license and not having a license? Is that the difference?
Suing them. It's just trying to stop them from doing it to me again or anybody else.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Because you're talking about the situation. I was involved in a situation when I was very young where a priest did sexually abuse me. When I went to my parents and tried to tell them, nobody believed me. And as a result, I went to school in a retarded class with retarded kids because I had emotional problems. Up until, I would say, the 6th grade. And that's when my father got me out of that class. I quit school at 8th grade. And by the 9th grade, I had a severe suicide attempt of 500 pills.
Let's understand your point here. First of all, nobody believed you when you made the allegation against the priest.
Right. Nobody believed.
Yeah.
How could I say anything like that?
I assume we have the agreement on the part of Dr. Sills and Dr. Maddox both of you here present as people who are respectful of the ministry and the difficulty it is to discharge these duties. This is not isolated.
No.
This is a problem.
We were talking during the break how embarrassed we are as ministers.
Right. So what is your remedy here? You don't want us to be able to sue these people. What would you have us do, and how do you fix this? Especially when you consider the need to cover this up.
It's an interesting dilemma. A moment ago, just even when you were on stage, and to this lady next to me, you said, "Can I help you?" Do you need to be licensed to be able to offer that point of counseling? If
No,
she said,
but I'm
that does not speak to the problem.
Paying a fee and having him be an expert on it.
Let me go on with what we're dealing with. I'm not, for God's sake, don't believe that I'm giving a blanket over all this as far as the clergy is concerned. We got some guys that ought to be, they ought to be hung.
Yeah.
But what we're dealing with is a reality that we're not dealing with. We may have a lot, but you've got a large body of life in this country which deals in the field of religion.
You're not offering that as an alternative, are you?
Hi. I'd like to ask Mr. Nally when he became aware that this church was preaching that suicide was okay.
I'm sorry. It was
and did you counsel then?
After he was dead.
I see. I see.
Phil, the church did not preach that suicide was okay. They made a theological point that if one was a Christian and a believer who happened to take his life, that the grace of God extended to that person to heaven. That's the point that I...
Which is not an endorsement of suicide.
Not in all an endorsement of suicide.
These two gentlemen here in the center, they seem to, be against, people being able to sue people of clergy. Yet I feel they should, have, like the woman said earlier down here, malpractice suit, just as a psychiatrist gives...
They're not licensed. And that's at least one of the issues on which this case turned.
But people still, hold faith in them. They do. Like this woman here, Shelley, the name is, she holds faith in them.
I would really like to speak about the licensing issue for just a minute. The law we have in Washington is not licensure. It's registration with a list of prohibited acts. And what it does is regulate business practices. There is not one thing on there that any reasonable clergy person should object to. They don't presumably want to have sex with clients, defraud them, misrepresent things.
Is that going to help?
Then you have a means for lifting a license, lifting a registration. You don't otherwise.
Yes.
Well, I was always told that you couldn't be forgiven for self-murder.
We could debate that theology. I don't think that's really what we're debating here. But it is unfair to suggest that the church advocated
But the only
suicide.
thing it is, it's the truth. And I would like to warn the two reverends here that the tape is here. And that section is here.
But the tape...
And you can hear it for your own ears and make your own judgment.
Hear what?
Hear that if you can't cope with your sins, as I mentioned before, and my son's sin was he saw a half-naked woman.
At the church?
That is a caricature of the whole thing. That is an absolute caricature of the whole thing.
He's alleging that this was an absurd kind of puritanistic, anachronistic theology that in his son's emotional condition made him feel doomed or somehow not worthy of God.
And he was checking, before he died, he was checking with a counselor. Are you sure? He wanted to be sure that if you are a believer and commit suicide, you will go to heaven. He checked with him. And this is the preacher man's own words.
You're so quick to blame people for your son's death. Were you close to him, and was he that emotionally stable himself? See, everybody else is getting blamed, but if you knew him, if phone conversation...
Usually people who go to counseling are emotionally unstable. So, that's not the issue. The issue is what is the responsibility of the person who goes to the counselor? And how much evidence do you need to know? If somebody jumps off a building while under psychiatric care, is the psychiatrist liable? That's one question. Is the pastor liable? No. You would not be upset if there was a warning and the warning was not taken seriously? Oh, now it's complicated, huh? So maybe you would be upset.
And add one more factor.
What is that?
The history of trying to commit suicide, we didn't know it, the pastors did.
Yes.
The tape that Mr. McNally has, is it of the counselor telling your son?
It's a class given by the church in biblical counseling.
and the counselor.
18
not
months
with your
after
son.
the young man's
No,
death.
that's not quite true, Pastor. That's what the church said, and they go by...
This is a tape which reveals the theology of
That's
the
right.
organization.
Phil,
And we'll
I'd
be
like
back.
to hear what the clergymen have to say about what they would do about holding members of the counseling clergy accountable.
I'll give you an opportunity to do that in just a moment.
Why is one church justified from another?
I'm sorry?
Why is one church justified from another? The Christian church has a scandal like Jim Baker and Jimmy Swaggart, the scandal, and no one trusts them anymore, but the Catholic church doesn't. It's not even a big thing. They say it's just one rotten apple out of the bunch. No matter who does it, it's wrong.
You're mad.
Especially when they try and cover it up.
You don't think the Catholics are getting the bad press they should be getting?
That's right. It's not a funny matter.
You want to talk about this? Hang on just a minute. You want to speak to that? Yeah.
I was just going to say that I have a daughter that's a senior in a Catholic school, and I find it very frightening as a parent that she's being taught through school a Catholic, religion, plus they've had different things on pack suicides and all different type of subjects. They've even had the Baltimore County Police Department in on all of this to teach the children. And yet as a parent, it concerns me that I might be sending my child to a Catholic school and hearing all this, and yet I don't know when she comes home if she may do the same thing.
Well, you're not suggesting the church is supporting this kind of...
Oh, no. I'm saying the church is doing everything to prevent this. But I'm saying as a parent, it's alarming to think that, you could send your child off to school and then, you don't... It's confusing.
Yeah.
to me.
Well, regarding the Catholic Church and pedophilia, everybody should be concerned. There's been a nationwide cover-up. In fact, in our area alone, we have 3 Catholic priests who've been engaged in this sort of activity for years, and it has been covered up.
Now, the question is, what will the law allow? What kind of testimony does it take, and what kind of evidence does it take to successfully sue a clergyman who is essentially a non-licensed, usually a non-licensed counselor?
We have the Nally decision to the contrary. We have been successfully suing members of the counseling clergy in Washington for years. And I do not believe that this will stop those kind of lawsuits.
Mr. Neely said that his son was raised a Roman Catholic, but was he a practicing Catholic when he left for college? And are you a practicing Catholic now?
Yes. You better be, Nally.
Phil, the
There it is,
children...
Donnie, what are you trying to be telling me?
Listen to me. God is watching you. He's watching us both.
I hope so.
We both have an iffy chance.
Phil, there are so many children that are affected by what we're discussing. We really haven't even touched on that.
Well, you'll be brief and do so.
Yes. There are children who are beaten in the name of counseling. There are children who have literally been beaten to death. There are children who have been denied medical services by their pastoral leaders.
There are women battered women have been told, listen, you're lucky you got him, go home and
go home
God's
and obey your husband.
It doesn't happen in every case, but it does happen. And
it happens a lot.
I think that since clergymen are prone to give advice to disturbed individuals, that goes for rabbis, ministers, and priests, that they should have psychological training. In other words, they should be licensed, and more than that, they should have to undergo the same course of study that psychologists go in order to get their accreditation.
What's the matter with that idea? What's the matter with that?
Briefly. Okay, basically, the issue here is not a matter of training. I think a person can counsel a person. It's accountability. Basically.
But because I think this decision had a lot to do with the fact that the person who counseled Mr. Nally's son was not licensed. So if it's going to turn on that...
Licensing is one thing, accountability is something else. If they want to govern themselves, I'm a medical student, and basically we are taught that we are always accountable.
This Nally decision appears to relieve religious counselors of legal liability. That's the question. That's the point.
Well, if you don't have practice standards encoded in law, it's hard to sue for malpractice. If you don't have practice standards encoded in law, it's hard to sue for malpractice. That's why it would be a very good idea to have members of the clergy state licensed or state regulated in some manner.
But it's a rather distracting image of a whole bunch of religious people standing in line at City Hall to get the state approval.
It isn't. Not when I hear the victims.
Recently, there was a bill introduced in Texas which would require the licensing of the practitioners of the laying on of hands and prayer for the sick.
Really?
The whole ramification, you walk in and shake hands with somebody in the hospital bed, you better have a license according to that particular... Now that's an area that you're not even interested in. You don't even know what you're talking about in that particular case. No big brother controlling. No big brother controlling it.
If your
what
child
we're dealing with is the reality of whether or not the law is going to control what right you have as an individual.
And Will, I've got a break. I'm awfully sorry. We'll be back in just a moment.
I need a moment in my day.
Yes, sir. I've got a Tuesday tattoo.
Myself at
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And nothing's like being invisible, and nothing's better for seeing the forest for the trees. And the good to the last drop feeling of Maxwell House, only Maxwell House. That's the good to the last drop feeling of Maxwell House and me.
Cats across America have depended on the #1 premium cat litter. Johnny Cat. Only Johnny Cat contains moisture-activated Green Guard odor control. So Johnny Cat works when you and your cat need it most. Johnny Cat premium cat litter and a little privacy is all any cat needs.
It's true, Uncle. A Christmas bonus from your Hyundai dealer. Up to $500.
Ah, no shrewd businessman gives money away.
But he's celebrating. Excel's the best-selling import again.
Celebrating? Humbug.
Right now, you can save up to $500 on an Excel. Even apply it to your down payment.
500, you say? Bah! It's true. All true.
Save up to $500 with factory-to-dealer incentives at your Hyundai dealer. But hurry, time is limited.
If you like bananas, you're going to love Dole Pine Orange Banana Juice.
I've got a feeling today's the day. Wanna get going in a different way. The perfect vacation from orange juice is Dole. The perfect vacation from orange juice is Dole.
Get away with Dole Pine Orange Banana Juice, the only fruit juice made with ripe banana, refreshing orange, and Dole 100% pure pineapple juice.
The perfect vacation from orange juice is Dole.
Honey, I was at Mervyn's today, and how would you feel about a new robe?
But I love my robe. Don't you love my robe?
For the last 10 years.
Oh.
Isn't that a little frayed around the edges?
Oh, so are you, dear, but I'm not trading you in.
Well, I saw some beautiful robes, and if I were to get you one...
The red one. I circled it. Ads on your dresser.
Good. I'll surprise you.
Now save 25% on coordinating robes and gowns at Mervyn's, a holiday tradition.
I could look at that for the next 10 years.
Survivors of Pearl Harbor recall the day of infamy tonight on Action News at 6.
Stop Abuse by Counselors is the organization in Seattle, and that's at Post Office Box 68292. Just let me, I'm glad you waited. Go ahead, caller.
Yes, Don here?
Yeah.
This is, Christy. 10 years ago, I slipped my wrist, and I had called my pastor. Meanwhile, I was seeing my Catholic priest about this problem I was having. I slipped my wrist, and he told me to go with the flow. And I hung up. I called my parents because after slicing my wrist, I felt life was more important to me than anything else.
So after you committed the act, you were sorry.
That's right.
And we're very pleased to know that you rallied. Was there any kind of, what happened to the priest?
We sent him away for 5 years. We sued him.
Yeah.
He is now in prison for 5 years.
Yeah, hang on a minute.
Clergymen are licensed by the state to perform marriages, isn't that correct? So what would be wrong with then licensing them for counseling?
Yeah.
What would be the difference?
Counseling, you know, that's the whole question.
What kind of test would you give them? What would determine who passes?
courses. First of all, they would have to take courses that would then enable them to deal properly with the people that they are dealing with disturbed people. You would not want just because he came out of a school. Most clergymen are given counseling courses as part of their seminaries.
Many are, but
and therefore, for the licensing, they would have had to take an approved course.
I'll tell you what scares me when you think, how many 500,000 of these folks? I mean, 500,000. We know, don't we, that not all of them know what they're doing.
I'm sure.
Then you've got the certain percentage of them who not only don't know what they're doing, but in a conscious way imbue the patient with ideas allegedly from God, which may not be in their long-term emotional or physical best interest.
Well, absolutely. This is what happened. She went to somebody. She was in a vulnerable state and was completely taken advantage of. Now, whether this person was licensed or unlicensed, it would have made no difference.
No, but I would have had recourse through the state to stop him from at least continuing to do it.
I'm just curious as to what level of education are we talking about to call someone a counselor?
Oh, in Washington, all you have to do is say you're counseling, say your business license.
The counselor at the churches that I sued didn't have one single course in the mental health, psychology, psychiatry, or nothing. However, they claimed that they could cure schizophrenia, deep depression, suicidality, homosexuality, nymphomania, you name it.
Over here, please.
What finally made you stop seeing the clergyman that you were seeing?
I found out that he had been doing it to other people, and it was the anger that he had lied to me initially is what snapped me out of it. It was then rage at everything that he had done.
How old were you at the time?
With you, though, is all right?
28. No, doing it with me wasn't all right. I was into a major denial.
Yes, over here, please.
We're talking about clergymen and the psychiatry field. What about teachers and guidance counselors? What accountability do they have? They have specific licensing, but how many suits are brought against them?
How about football coaches?
There are brought against.
Really, when you think, you know, Pee-wee football?
That's right.
Do they know that that's a baby in that helmet? And how liable do we want to make them?
Phil, many of the clergy that are involved may characterize psychologists or counselors as being evil or satanic, and by that means preempt them from even seeking outside counseling, and that's a major issue we need to think about.
Mr. Nally, where's your wife at? How come she's not here with you today?
She wasn't invited.
You trying to make me feel bad?
Mr. Nally, I think that you should have less faith in the clergy and more faith in God.
Thank you, but believe it or not, we Catholics do believe in God, and I think we are Christians.
Yes.
I think one thing you always... I think one thing you always have to remember is when people do go for help, usually they're in a very severe, deep depression.
Yes, that's a good point.
So, like this woman said, she really trusted this man. Here, this gentleman back here was saying, why did she let this happen? She put all of her faith, all of her trust in this man, and they're giving these people guidance, and they're living by this guidance.
Yeah.
Just like Mr.
No,
McGarrison.
we hear the same question. Well, if he beats you, why'd you stay with him? I do think it's really important to understand that it's possible to get yourself in a situation where you're really not on all your pins and making all the logical judgments
My
about...
judgment was definitely not at its best at the time.
But, Phil, we don't need to re-victimize the victims, do we?
No, I agree. That's the point we're trying to make here.
Trying to do that at all.
I have to break. I'll give you that. I'm awfully sorry. Someday we won't have this problem, but it's not today. We'll be back. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Shop Gottschalk's now for men's sweaters. You'll find over $1 million in men's sweaters, perfect for Christmas. Save on Fog, River Trader, and more. These sweaters are already value priced, but for a limited time, buy one at the current price. Get the second at equal or lesser value at 50% off. Thousands of men's sweaters, hundreds of styles and colors. Buy one at the current price. Get the second one at 50% off. In the men's department at Gottschalk's.
My fellow Texans get kind of ornery when I tell them the best salsa is La Victoria. La Victoria? From California? Look, thicker, fresher, and more authentic, and tastes fantastic. My caddy says they'll get even with me for bad mouthing their picante sauce, but I told him not to worry. I told him not to worry.
La Victoria Salsa Picante or Suprema. You just can't miss.
Frost, mud on my favorite jeans. I wear them so much, they're hard to keep clean. Messy cookie stains, well, well, well. Mama lifts them out with A-L-L. All's the stain left, cause as you can see, all's got the power to make stains history. Every time stains on my favorite jeans fall, Mama lifts them out with A-L-L. That's all, the stain lifter, that's all.
What would you like for Christmas?
Oh, I don't know. Something nice. Yeah, something nice. From Fig Garden Village.
Fig Garden Village. That would be nice.
Fig Garden Village.
At Christmas, it's the thought that counts.
A new sports drink made in Fresno. The Closer Look tonight, live at 5.
And 1,000 people want to get in. Rick Ross is the intervention coordinator at 221 East Camelback Road, Suite 1, Phoenix, Arizona. And this is at the very least something that has to be on our agenda. The Nally decision by the Supreme Court of the State of California appears. We'd be here till the Tonight Show discussing the details of this, and I know that it's somewhat unfair to give the back of the hand a quick brush to this very complicated case. But essentially, this court decided that the agency or the church or the people or persons who were in the company of his son at the time that he was planning and subsequently committed suicide were not liable for his death. And Mr. Nally is going to spend the rest of his life pursuing this issue to the Supreme Court. He thinks that if a religious figure counsels you, and if the flares go up that you're going to do something very bad to yourself, that person has a responsibility to blow the whistle. And he's claiming that this organization didn't, and the court is saying, wait a minute, they weren't licensed, among other things, and now we're back to, should that be the difference? And how much do you want your clergyman to be responsible for the well-being of the loved ones who go and see?
I think if a clergyman takes the initiative in a situation, he should know the ramifications of his advice.
Yeah.
And if he knows that he can't deal with a particular situation, he should advise this person to go to someplace else. Similar in a situation, if you come across someone that's injured.
Yeah. It's an hour show.
Okay.
Thanks for making the point.
I don't think that they should be licensed or anything. I don't think that they should be allowed to go too deep into counseling. If they have someone that's disturbed...
Well, what's too deep and how you codify that?
It can be only under a very general thing, not something for months and months.
All right.
I'd just like to make the point that Mr. O'Nally is correct in the fact that the clergy told his son to do that, but a counselor doesn't tell somebody to jump off a building.
No, this is complicated in that it has not only psychotherapeutic counseling, or what do we just say, counseling, it also has religious tenets involved here, and what it is that people are encouraged to believe. No small question for the loved ones of the people of the Jonestown massacre. Yes?
To whom should the whistle be blown? The gentleman says you should blow the whistle.
Who do you think?
The parents.
If someone you love goes to a psychiatrist and talks about suicide, when is the violation of confidence broken, and under what circumstances should that counselor go to an agency or a loved one and say, I'm fearful about the well-being of your son?
I'm talking about Mr. Nelly's son.
Yeah. What about?
Because you say the psychiatrist should blow the whistle. He should tell the parents or the next of kin.
Yes.
But apparently this counselor didn't want to do that at all.
Apparently not. Yes.
I also lost a daughter similar to where a lot of people believe that she was killed herself, although I try not to. And she went to counseling, and we spent a whole year in counseling with my family.
Yeah.
And a year before she died, I knew something was up, and I tried to call the counseling, and they said she was gone. There's no way, no help whatsoever.
You mean she was gone before she killed herself?
Yes, the counseling was gone. I couldn't get in touch with her again.
I see. Did you know that your daughter was considering?
Well, I knew something was radically wrong, and I wanted to talk to her again.
Do you blame anybody?
No. Everybody says, don't you blame God? Don't you blame, people? I says, no, I can't do that, and I'm Catholic. I can't do that.
Is it your feeling?
I believe that it's within yourself. And the only reason I feel this is because she was adopted, and I feel she didn't have my genes. I have 2 other kids, and they're fine. So it was the school she was in, and we put her into a private school, and even that didn't help. So it's within the person themselves.
Mr. Nally, how does the congregation in that church feel about this pastor now?
I don't know. I'm not a member of the church.
It still functions, though, and moves along, huh?
Oh, yeah, it's
really
big business. He's moving along.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Warm, snuggly. That's what Kmart robes and gowns are. And now they're 25% off. Come to the Kmart robes and gown sale and make your Christmas warmer than ever. Save 25% through Saturday at Kmart.
Cynthia really outdid herself this time.
Champagne, fresh shrimp, plastic plates. Plastic plates?
Should have been
Chinette.
Chinette. No leaks, no drips, no disasters. It's the next best thing to China.
For those hardy souls who brave the elements in search of the perfect tree, McDonald's has a treat just for you. For a short time, we're serving holiday chicken McNuggets with a festive orange sauce. There are also thick, rich eggnog milkshakes and cool peppermint sundaes. They're just our way of wishing you a joyous season.
Your holiday place, McDonald's.
Even non-members save big at the Home Club. November 21st. A comparison of the Home Club's non-member prices with those at Lumberjack reveals big savings at the Home Club. Example, Lumberjack sells the Stanley 24-inch level for $10.99. That's twice as much as Home Club non-members pay every day. And Home Club members save even more. Yes, the list goes on and on. Because at the Home Club, you save on everything, every day. Sprouts Right savings make your holiday shopping easier. $2.47 buys this pack of holiday gift wrap, 3 jumbo rolls in traditional or novelty designs. Country flavor matted photo frames, now 2 for $5. 2 popular sizes in your choice of fashion colors. 99 cents buys these chocolate-covered cherries, a favorite holiday treat in dark burgundy or milk chocolate flavors at Sprouts Right. For holiday selection and savings, shop Sprouts Right.
Dolls from China? Watches from Switzerland? No wonder the big guy needs 364 days to shop.
Oh, I'm going to sleep that long. Imagine the miles he must put on shopping.
Finding the right gift is easy at Miller's Outpost. Choose from our great selection of fashion brand name jeans for juniors. Like the latest Jordache jeans in all your favorite styles and colors, only $27.99.
Survivors of Pearl Harbor recall the day of infamy tonight on Action News at 6.
Mr. Nally, since we can't solve it through a legal procedure, I would suggest that you get a support group and go for them.
Thank you, woman.
I still think that the average person will be more able to go to their parish priest or minister.
I do too. I do too. I do too. I'd go to him before
We
you
have
go
a
to...
great deal of religious freedom at stake here, Phil. I hope that in the midst of all this pain that we won't lose.